Hey, Billy Glisson with PowerCore 360. You know, there's a lot of talk these days and a lot of training going on with rotation of the body. I'm going to show you a couple different ways to rotate the body more effectively with more power. Traditional way is put a band in the hand. I've got it anchored back behind me. And as a right-hander, this is a pushing pattern. I'm going to basically step and push my backside, my right leg and hip, and try to rotate that through like a punching motion through my target, right? That's one way to do it. Understand as we're talking about this, when we're talking about the lower half of the body, we're talking about the right leg and hip and the left leg and hip. And sometimes when people talk, they talk about pushing the backside or working the backside through, or clearing the golf terminology, clearing the left hip out of the way. Both sides actually have to work together. If we just get into a pushing pattern, you may find that you don't have quite as much power and speed as you'd like. Even though you're creating force and rotational torque, you may not be getting as much power and speed that you want or that you could get. Let's talk about a different rotational pattern. The movement's going to be very similar. I ultimately want to end up with my right hand going forward, but I'm actually going to use some different muscles to do this. I'm actually going to put the band in my left hand. I'm assuming the same stance and posture, but now I'm actually using the muscles on the back side of my left shoulder, spine, and hip to actually help me take the right hand forward. I'm actually turning my left side back. So if I was actually wanting to punch and punch with more power and speed, if I can get my left hip and left leg back out of the way and left shoulder back out of the way, I'm going to actually turn my chest, turn my shoulders, turn my spine faster, right? And if I'm looking for a rotational power to hit, throw, kick, or punch, that's really what I'm looking for. Both sides are actually working together. I need the back side to be able to push through. At the same time, the front side is pulling back and clearing out of the way. You could actually play and work both sides at the same time. So in this case, I'm pushing with the back side, and at the same time, I'm pulling with the front side to get it back out of the way. Now, I'm not dumping my elbow out and away from the body. I want to keep my hands and arms in pretty close to my spine. The closer I keep them into my spine, the faster, the more rotation and power and speed I'm going to get with that movement. Okay, if you're using our PowerCore 360 equipment, PowerCore 360 hip harness or torso harness, or both in this case, and I'm going to work on a push pattern here. Once again, it's good to work on a push pattern, so here's how we condition it. In this case, I've got the bands hooked to my left underarm, left hip, it's running across the front of my body. That provides resistance, so when I start this pushing pattern, it's really pushing and resisting that back hip, back shoulder to get through, so it's strengthening the muscles all the way up from my back foot, up through my hip, through my front shoulder, to work on that push pattern and strengthening the muscles to make that pattern happen. Obviously, the nice thing about putting it here is we've got the resistance on the body core where the rotational stability really needs to start around my hip, my spine, my pelvis, my shoulder blades. Those stabilizer muscles in there, postural muscles, have to fire very quickly to stabilize and then to actually create those movements. But in this case, I'm just working on a push pattern and I'm strengthening those muscles with the bands attached to the harnesses. Okay, I've just completed the push pattern. Now I'm going to work on the pull pattern. I've got my torso harness on, hip harness on. I've got bands hooked to my left underarm, left hip. And so now I'm going to take this same posture like I was pushing. I'm going through the same motion, but I'm actually having to really work now on the left shoulder, left hip, moving them back out of the way. So I'm now really working on the muscles more on the back side of the body, back side of the spine, hips, pelvis, shoulders, and core to work on the pull pattern. Now I'm strengthening those muscles to make that part of the pattern happen. Okay, advanced exercise where I'm going to work on a pushing pattern and a pulling pattern at the same time. I'm going to push with the band in my right hand, and I'm going to pull with the band hooked to my left underarm, torso harness, and left hip. So I'm pulling back out of the way, and the bands are providing resistance in front, resistance in back in the pushing pattern, and I'm working on both of them at the same time. When I work on the push and pull at the same time, my body, my joints, my muscles have to learn to create more torque and more stability in those patterns. And I'm training both patterns at the same time. Look at the time code in the description of the video down below, and you'll see where you can jump ahead to some of the sport-specific applications. In a baseball or softball swing, as a right-handed hitter, the same kind of concept still applies. There's so much talk about just using the backside and getting the backside through. Well, That's going to limit my rotational power and speed if I just am basically going back here, coil loading, and pushing my backside through, right? I'm only getting so far, and then I just kind of run in and I can't turn anymore. On the other side, we know that if we take the front side shoulder and we just make it fly open in baseball or softball hitting terminology, I can fly open and the backside's not doing its job. Once again, both sides need to work together. I need to use the ground, I need to be pushing with my backside through the ball, but as I'm doing that, I need my front side hip to be rotating back out of the way. Same thing with the shoulder. Back shoulder is driving through, front shoulder is getting out of the way. When I do that, I'm going to turn my shoulders around my spine faster, my hips are going to turn faster, and when they turn faster with more power, the results are going to be my hands, arms, and barrel are coming through with more speed, right? Train both sides, train the push, train the pull, put the two together, because in real life movement and in sports movement, baseball, softball, hitting in this case, we need the hips, the spine, and the shoulders to work together. One's pushing through, one's pulling back to get out of the way. That creates more rotation, torque, and speed. If I'm throwing a baseball or a football as a right-handed thrower, and all I do is use the backside, and I take a little bit of a step, but I'm really working on the back hip, back shoulder, trying to push through, I'm not going to create as much torque once again, because I'm just trying to push the ball through. And even though I'm getting some rotation, that's not near as good as taking the backside and pushing through while the front side hip, the front side shoulder are pulling back, and at the same time I'm pushing. So there, all of a sudden, when I do that and I get that front foot on the ground, now I'm starting to create more body torque. That's going to create more arm whip. So it doesn't matter what I'm throwing overhead, football, baseball, hitting a tennis ball, right? Whatever the case is, anything overhead in that motion, I want the backside pushing through, I want the front side pulling back, I want faster rotation, more stability, I want a faster turn around both hips and around my spine to create that arm and ultimately resulting in ball speed, racket speed, whatever we're talking about there. Make both sides work together. So if we're talking about the golf swing for a right-handed golfer, I can take a pushing pattern. I can actually use my left hand, and to go into my backswing, I can push this side of my body, and I can take the arm and club and push out here to try to create that rotation. As I do that though, what I feel is, once again, I feel this time my left side pushing through, and I don't quite feel my right hip and my right shoulder and my spine turning very well. I kind of get out here and I kind of get stuck. And what you'll notice is, in terms of the shoulder turn in the golf swing, if I was doing that, I'm really not getting very full shoulder turn. And it's really just a function of how I'm choosing to rotate my body. If I just use the left side and push the club and push my hand and arm that direction, I'm not going to get a full shoulder turn. I'm going to end up not turning as far, not turning as fast. Club head speed, distance, all that is going to suffer. On the other side of this, if I now take the right side of my shoulder, the back side of my right shoulder, the back side of my hip and spine, and I, in essence, pull them back out of the way, look at the difference immediately that happens with my shoulder turn when I pull it back out of the way. I didn't make any changes in my flexibility, my mobility, my strength. I just used a different loading pattern of my body for the golf swing. The point with all this is I want to condition both patterns. I want to train a push pattern, so there may be times where I want to work on the muscles that are responsible to push in that direction. But if I don't make my right hip and my left hip and my spine work together by pushing on one side and pulling on the other, I'm not going to get back and load into my hips, load into my legs, my spine, my chest, and my shoulders. I'm not going to get as much power, club head speed, and distance out of that. So you need to do both. If I'm hitting a volleyball overhead, jump serve, attack swing, whatever the case may be, same concept applies. If I'm just using my back hip and my back shoulder to create rotation, certainly that's better than just swinging my arm at it, but I'm turning my back hip, turning my back shoulder, pushing through, and I don't quite have same rotational speed for my body, my shoulders. I'm going to end up with my arm speed and resulting ball speed not being as fast, just taking a pushing pattern and happening. Right? The other side of it is I could create a pulling pattern, left shoulder, left hip, and pull back and swing. And that's a little bit loose, right? But that's good. The ideal scenario is I want the back side pushing through, I want the front side pulling back. When that happens, I get faster speed, of the body turn, more torque. The result is going to be my arm is going to come through faster, and when I get that really trained well, I'm going to have a lot faster rotation, more stability, which means more control, more arm speed, more ball speed.